Hello and welcome to week 4 in History of Psychology. And here we're going to be taking on chapter 4, the new psychology, really the kind of beginnings of moving into a field of psychology separate from its medical and philosophical histories, as we've been looking at the physiological, and now we're looking into this the new experimental psychology, the actual emergence of a field that is really starting to resemble what we know of today as psychology. Can't underplay the role of Wilhelm Wundt, who created what we now suppose as the first psychological lab. This was an interesting part of history where, if you've ever seen, probably the best way I can say this about this, sort of the machine Bronze Age of psychology, if you ever get a chance to look at a movie that is a historical depiction of H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, and you look at the time machine itself, and you look at the decor of the office, and you look at all of the things in this, and what you see are a lot of mechanical instruments. And in addition to that, those mechanical instruments tend to be ornate and beautiful in their own mechanistic way. And this is the age in which this is happening. There's a fascination with machines, there's a fascination with human ingenuity, and then the application of creating machines that will measure psychological responses. So a lot of Wilhelm Wundt's lab was full of these instruments, all made out of brass and iron and metal and different metals and whatnot. Just very, very elegant time in history. And it's also important, this is more of kind of something about that point in history when scientists were creating instruments and when people were building buildings, particularly churches. One of the motivations for making them so elegant was they truly felt that they were exploring the cosmos. Most people, even scientists, still believed in God, still believe in God today, and their efforts to create machines reflected the perspective of honoring the elegance of creation. So you didn't want to use a brutal machine to measure the cosmos or to measure a person's cognition. These things were beautifully designed, and therefore the instruments to measure them were also beautifully designed. It's part of the artistic ethic of individuals of the day. So within Wundt's perspective, there was the idea of introspection. He trained himself, trained his colleagues through this arduous process of being able to separate objective from subjective to whatever degree they were able to do that, so they could observe reactions within themselves and be objective about them. That was the goal. And he actually referred to the process of understanding something out there, understanding what we know of as a schema, this idea that we take information from the outside world and we create an internal representation of that. He called that apperception, using the word perception and bringing together perception to create an internalized whole idea. So I couldn't let that word go without including a personality test that evolved from that word in that time, called the thematic apperception test, which presents you with a picture, and then that picture has vague elements. So the idea of the thematic apperception test is you have this sort of vague picture that's presented to you, a drawing, and you have to tell a story about it. But Wundt's work was not that the ultimate product, the schema that we constructed in our brain, is a result of both objective information from the outside world and perceptions and attitudes and cognitive qualities within us. So by analyzing the product of this apperception, some psychologists believe that they could diagnose mental health problems. Kind of makes sense. If somebody's looking at a picture and or a series of pictures and they're constantly coming up with highly negative um, stories, then maybe they're a pretty negative person. You can kind of see that thing. Okay, so in the discussion for this week, I'm asking you to contemplate about the whole idea of introspection. Now, in today's world, to be objective, we tend to have instruments and tools that remove that idea of my own perceptions having some sort of say on my data. That's the objectifying, kind of way in which science approaches its question today. But here was a method that embraced that and said this unique experience, provided you were trained to turn it into apperceptions, was a good way. What do you think? It's as I would probably tell you, as a individual, it's the way in which you've come to know yourself. So that's a given, that you use introspection in a way to come to conclusions about yourself. The quiz presents you with an image from the apperception test, and then I'm asking you to write a story about it, and then interpret that story. Do the apperception test on yourself. Take the test, you look at the picture, write a story. That's the first part. The second part, do a little bit of introspection and say, oh, why did I come up with that particular story? What inner movements in my psyche contributed damn it, contributed to the development of that story instead of another story. It's not a focus on the objective elements of the picture. It's a focus on your interpretation and why did you interpret it that way instead of another way. So I'm going to be looking for a deep reflection. You don't have time to get all of that training from Vunt. It took years to do that, but I'm asking you to do it on this particular quiz. So those are the assignments for this week. I look forward to seeing you online. Have a great week and take care.